Oh, that was good. Good, it came on, kind of right in the middle there. Hey, we're in a relationships conversation, and this is enough relating, okay? Stop with all this kind of stuff. I want to invite you as Haley reads the scriptures, to turn your attention to the screen and follow along with her.
Cool, thanks, Steve. So we're reading from Ephesians 4, starting at verse 25. Therefore, put away all falsehood. Let each one of you speak the truth with his neighbor, for we are members of one another. Be not angry, and do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your anger, and give no opportunity to the devil. Let the thief no longer steal, but rather let him labor doing honest work with his own hands, so that he may have something to share with anyone in need. Let no corrupting talk come out of your mouths, but only such as is good for building up, as fits the occasion, that it may give grace to those who hear. And do not grieve the Holy Spirit of God, from whom you are sealed for the day of redemption. Let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and slander be put away from you, along with all malice. Be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, as God in Christ forgave you. Thanks.
For that, let's pray. So, Father, as we collect ourselves, as we gather around and bow our hearts before you, we've sung and we've loved you back for the incredible God you are and the incredible things that you have done for us. We want to come and we want to be before the scriptures here and before your instruction for us as to how we follow you in real life. And so we pray that you would equip us, that you would tilt our hearts toward you, that you would cause us to see you in awe and wonder, and to live in a radical dependence upon you moving through us to bring glory to you and good to our world. In Jesus' name, amen. As we mentioned, we are talking about relationships, and this morning we are talking about the role of forgiveness in relationships as one of those things that keeps relationships, relating, if you will. And as Ryan was kind of planning out the communicators for the series, he said, Steve, I think you need a lot more practice at asking people to forgive you, and so I'm going to give you forgiveness, and so that's why I'm here, and so we're going to do that a little bit. But as we talk about relationships and relating to one another, one of the places that Debbie and I, over the years, she's trained me well. She's trained me well in relating to her, and we've related and bonded in particular over a number of different varieties of HGTV Reno shows. Anybody else in this club or whatever? There's no man that raised his hand. I'm shocked by that. Yeah. But you kind of know the general gist of it, right? It's kind of like, a crime drama. It follows a similar pattern to a crime drama, right? Because some of them actually kind of feel criminal. But here's the basic pattern. You can follow along with me. This is probably true of a car reno show. It's definitely true of that. So it goes something like this, right? Family comes, they have a house. Hey, we want to do this reno. Designer smart people come in. This is what it's going to cost. It's going to be fantastic. Here's the after picture that we're going to give to you. We all are kind of like in awe. We wish we lived in that town. Can we just pause there for a second? Right? Wherever that town is, I want to live in that town right there. So they come in, and then there's demo day, right? Demo day is always fun. It's always all that kind of stuff. But it leaves you with the proverbial blank slate for this house that we've kind of seen a picture of, but eventually by, 60 minutes in, we're going to get the real deal, right? But somewhere this happens. You guys know this as well. Somewhere drama occurs, right? Because drama drives the story along. So the drama goes something like, we found something, right? We found, and then there's a whole list of things. You can go through the list. You kind of know what they are, right? But somehow drama occurs, and then this happens in that drama. We didn't budget for this, right? So now we really have drama because people who at the front end were happy over here have now found out that the project is completely stalled unless something happens. Either this incredible downstairs bathroom something or other, right, is gone, removed from the project, to which one of the people in the couple says, well, that's the only reason we're doing this thing, right? So there's that. Or the second factor is, or we're going to need more what? Money. Yeah. So, in other words, someone is going to have to absorb the cost, the debt, right? Someone's going to have to do that. We can't move the project along without this. To forgive is to absorb the debt. It's to absorb the debt. It's to come to that place, right, where there is a debt and the debt is real. And then the reality of that debt, forgiveness is what removes the debt. Someone at this juncture in the show has to pay, right? So it's either the room that we were doing, this is the reason we were doing it in the first place, that gets sacrificed, that's a debt, right? This is what we really wanted to do. Or we have to infuse more cash that we don't really have or didn't have at the front end of the show or whatever that is. And so somewhere in there, a debt occurs as incurred, and someone has to pay it. And the root word for forgiveness and the place where we wrestle with it is to forgive a debt. And when we come into relationships and into a relational dynamic, we have to embrace the fact that as we forgive and learn to forgive one another, that we get to these places in all meaningful relationships where something has occurred that is a debt. And someone has to absorb the cost of the debt. And to be that person is to become a forgiving person who has learned how to absorb the debt in community and in relationship with one another. We've got just a little bit of information here that we want to hit, and as we ask the question in relationships, who's going to absorb the cost? But here's kind of the fundamental principle of the way that the New Testament tilts our hearts and moves us toward this in relationship. This is the basic arc, the inner logic of what it means to become a forgiving community and a forgiving person. It's this: forgiven people forgive people. That's the basic, fundamental, core, in 4 words, how does this actually work thing for followers of Jesus. That because we have been forgiven, we have the capacity and the ability to extend that forgiveness to other people. And remember, forgiveness is the paying down of a real debt, okay? So when we forgive people, we have acknowledged and accepted that our debt has been completely, it's just what we sang, right? Over and over and over again. That the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords has stooped to pay our debt. And in doing that, he actually fills us with the capacity to, through us, extend that paying down, if you will, to other people. Okay, so that's kind of where forgiveness slots in here. But as you listen to in the passage that Haley just spoke about, or just read for us rather, you heard it as well because you're doing the math with me. That forgiveness is not the only thing about being a follower of Jesus, right? And so as we walk kind of through this and we talk about the relational aspect of being a community, of being a family, of being a couple, of being in relationship with other people, we don't just isolate forgiveness as the only thing. We see it in the context of a whole bunch of relational dynamics that occur. And that's actually the way that it is given to us in the letters of the New Testament that one of which we just read read here as well. So I want to go back through here, and I want to highlight some stuff and kind of walk through this passage in Ephesians 4 to kind of walk through a little bit of the dynamics of what God invites us into and the beauty of it, and to see forgiveness as a part of that larger whole, okay? So there's a couple different things that we're going to talk about here in here as well, about in Ephesians chapter 4. But I want you to listen to this. What are the things in the passages we walk through really quickly that are things that detract or even destroy the relational dynamic? And what are the things that build it or make it beautiful? Okay? What destroys or detracts, what builds it, and what makes beautiful, okay? You heard it in the passage. Let's walk through it here again. Therefore, putting away falsehood, let each one of you speak the truth with his neighbor, for we are members of one another. Be angry and do not sin, and do not let the sun go down on your anger, and give no opportunity to the devil, which apparently being angry and unresolved does. Let the thief no longer steal, but rather let him labor, doing honest work with his own hands, so that he may have something to share with anyone in need. Let no corrupting talk come out of your mouths, but only such as is good for building up, as fits the occasion, that it may give grace to those who hear. We'll just leave that up there for a second, okay? You can kind of hear the back and forth, right? The back and forth of that, right? So put away falsehood and speak truth with your neighbor, right? So we don't want to lie. We don't want to be people who build our lives on lies. No one wakes up in the morning thinking, I hope I really build my life on a foundation of falsehood. Amen? And yet one of the things that is unique to the human condition is our capacity to be deceived. It's kind of awful, isn't it? It's kind of awful when you have to confess to someone that, yes, you did respond to the wrong Facebook ad and you tried to buy something for 1 cent on the dollar because you thought it was legit, right? Or now, even with AI, some things coming down the pike, but even just a few years ago, some of you know these people, some of you are these people, you get the call from your grandson, and it sounds like your grandson. And your grandson is in Mexico, and he's in jail. And he needs money, right? And he calls you his pet name, right? And so that capacity to be deceived, we don't want to build our lives on that. And so how do you do that? You speak truth with his neighbor. We're members of one another. In the same way, anger, right? We can be angry. God is angry, after all, or can be angry, and we see him in there. So it's a legitimate thing as part of his image bearers to experience anger. It's part of what makes us human and part of what makes us like him. We share that with him. But we do not exercise that anger inappropriately or in some way in retribution to other people. We don't let the sun go down on that anger and give the devil an opportunity to create a root of bitterness. Louis Giglio wrote a book recently called Don't Give the Enemy a Seat at Your Table. It is based upon actually a story that he shares in the beginning of the book. He had some people. He's a very public figure, pastor at part of the Passion Movement and a pastor in Atlanta. And so he had some people, as happens apparently with public figures and not so public figures, right? He had some people take issue with him or whatever, and basically kind of air him out and his character out. And so these people kind of, true colors showed through, whatever. And he's feeling all of the vindication of that. God bless him for being so transparent in the book. He's feeling all the vindication of the fact that these people were proven to be who they are. And so he texts a buddy of his, good buddy, like inner circle buddy. And inner circle buddy, he said, hey man, this is coming down or whatever. I just want you to know, this is like, see, I kind of like told you that this is the way it was going to play out. Long pause, right? The dreaded no response to your text when you like sent a text that like you're out there a little bit with someone. Finally, his bro just texts these words. Don't give the enemy a seat at your table. He's basing it off that section in there in Psalm 23, right, where the Lord is my shepherd. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no. You prepare a place for me in the presence of my enemies. And his buddy, in those few words, said all of this self-righteousness and all of this vindication and all of this is actually fueling something not good in you. You're out for something that is not probably from the Lord. And in that moment, right, comes out of that comes this book where we have this back and forth of, okay, so I'm angry, but I do not seek retribution. I do not seek vengeance. I do not seek getting my pound of flesh out of that. Now, this is really challenging for many of you because pretty much every movie or show you've watched in the last 2 years has been about retribution and justice. At least it has been in many ways for me, right? This is so hardwired in. Do we want to go get them? And yet the Apostle Paul says here, there's a pullback here. We don't give the devil an opportunity because we can give him a seat at our table by not stewarding our anger. And we're going to get to the forgiveness part here in a second, okay? Now, it continues to go on. Let the thief steal. I've thought about this for a long time, actually, because I thought, okay, the thief steal, where does that come from? But we're going to get somewhere here in a second with kind of what happens. The thief takes, right? And so what is the antidote or the corrective in the gospel for the thief? Take these hands, right, that are skilled at thieving and turn it around and make a contribution, right? And then finally in 29, let no corrupting talk come out of your mouths. The Greek word actually, it means rotten, putrid, disgusting, vile, vomit, okay? So when we think about that, it's like, hey, don't allow rottenness to come out of your mouth. But, there we go, another but, as such is good for building up as it fits the occasion, that it may give grace to those who hear. Now, we continue on here just real quickly here. I'll walk through this next little section here. And do not grieve the Holy Spirit of God, by whom you were sealed for the day of redemption. Let me just offer you a thought as to why I think that's right in the center of this thing. All the stuff that has come before in this paragraph and all the stuff comes after, right, is about building people up, not tearing them down. And right in the middle, I think what we get offered is when we tear down, instead of building up, we are actually working against God. Hello. Like, what's God doing? He's building the lives of his people. He's basing them on truth. He's basing them on working it out in the context of relationships. He's bolstering and accentuating the image of God in every single person. And so what we're invited into is to not grieve by going against what it is that God is doing in the lives of people. Finally, then, this last section here of bitterness, wrath, anger, and clamor, slander be put away from you along with all malice, and be kind to one another, tenderhearted, forgiving one another as God in Christ forgave you. And now we get to that section of forgiveness. This is kind of my thought on this section. I think we've got it in a slide. Our words have the power to erode and corrode. They also have the power to build up and to bless. Our words and our actions have the power to erode and corrode, and they also have the power to build up and to bless. We kind of know that in our bones, right? But we see that here in that this isn't the way, this is the way. This is not the way, this is the way. This is not the way, this is the way. Where we participate actively with God, the Holy Spirit, in what he is doing in the lives of people in relationship with one another. So the erosion thing, right? We see this all the time living in coastal California, right? What happens to our beaches? Big storms come, sand goes, and what happens? They have to be bolstered. There was something that flashed on my little Weather Channel app the other day, because this place in the United Kingdom called Dinosaur Beach, some of you may be familiar with it, but they've just had this big kind of cliff spill in there as well, right? That erosion occurs and all these dinosaur fossils that have been found there, and people beachcombing for these dinosaur fossils, they've been warned, don't go near this particular beach. It was really hard for me because I'm in the United Kingdom on a regular basis so often, and so just part of my travel itinerary, and I was really kind of like, wow, you're going to interrupt? That's almost funny. Okay, thank you. Chris, you kind of laughed. I appreciate that. Yeah, you know my travel schedule really well. So that erode factor, right, we just watch this happen kind of all the time. But there's also an aspect of this where corrosion can occur. These are kind of two different things, right? We see the erosion on a big scale. We see really, in many ways, we just see the power of water among many things, right? But corrosion is a little bit of a different kind of a thing. In fact, if you want to pull out your phone and look for the definition of it in there, you're going to find that corrosion is a metal kind of thing in which the wrong things get together and they produce a disintegration of what is occurring. And both of those things can happen. You can hear that in the rottenness, right? That if you and I are communicating a rottenness, that over time it's going to just disintegrate and be super gross. Debbie and I have a friend who's, well, this is the picture, I think we have it up here, of what happened. So this is a pipe in their home. And they were noticing that there's like a restricted flow in what's happening in their pipes and stuff. So eventually it's like, yeah, this isn't really working. And believe me, Drano's not making this making it happen. And so the plumber took a picture of what he cut away in this too. And that is all from stainless steel. That's just all corrosion. That over years and years and years and years, that is disintegrated metal. Okay? That's what happens. That's what can happen when our words or our actions are corrosive. And of course, you see landslides from erosion when things like that happen because of the power of words. And what we're invited into is to flip that. That our words have the power to erode and corrode, right? But they also have the power to build up and to bless. Let me just pause here for a second. Let's take a breath. I want you to think of someone's words in your life, maybe this morning, maybe this week, maybe this month, maybe this year, that has built you up. Encouraged you. Mark Twain, right, famously said, I can live for a long time. I can't remember. Some of you will remember. I can live for a long time on a good compliment. Right? That's something that's accurate, something that's meaningful, something that's eyeball to eyeball, something that really communicates care, something that really communicates you're valuable, you matter, you make a contribution, I believe in you, I want to be in relationship with you, let's connect, let's be this, all that kind of stuff, right? And those words have this incredible power to build up. Now, you could be kind of a mess, but you could have that eyeball-to-eyeball conversation with somebody, and it's kind of like, oh my gosh, I just became human. You ever had that moment? Like, I think I just became human again. I was less so for a while there. Like, I was limping around. I was nothing. I was a worm. I was less than a worm. I was something. I have no contribution to make to the world. Not that I'm ever histrionic, but, ask my wife. But those kinds of things kind of come through, and then all of a sudden, right? And you've had that moment, that conversation, that eyeball to eyeball, that group connection, that spousal connection, that whatever it is, where it's like, okay, wow, that's awesome. Thank you. And it's kind of like you almost don't have words for what it means to you, right? For the building up and for the blessing of what it is. That aspect of our words being able to corrode and erode and to build up and to bless are part of what Christian community comes together and is around. And at the back end of this, Paul caps this conversation with, and be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving each other, just as God in Christ has forgiven you. Remember, we started with the fact that forgiven people forgive people. That this repository that we have to be able to give forgiveness away, to pay down a debt that has come at us, only comes for believers in Jesus because God has forgiven our debt. Jesus created multiple teaching moments where he talked about the scale of debt that a person would have before God and then had before another person, and how because God has forgiven, we can extend that forgiveness. And we are invited into that kind of a relational dynamic with one another. So, I want to, this has been a journey for me in a lot of different ways. Don't worry, I'm not going to get kind of weird or inappropriate with you about any of that. Only simply to say that forgiveness can be an incredible relational challenge based upon kind of the circumstances. And one of the challenges for me in just having 1 week talking about forgiveness is just thinking for 10 seconds about the scope of what you guys may be thinking about right now as you think about forgiveness. Some of you you've been massively injured, traumatized, abused in more ways than we can even count. And so the whole construct of forgiveness, yes, we get it in one sense, and in another sense, it's like, do you have any idea? And the shorter version is no, probably not for some of you, really. I mean, I can peer, I can look, I can be there, but I haven't experienced what you've experienced. I haven't. But all of us can share in that solidarity that we've had circumstances in which this can be enormously challenging, right? Debbie and I were talking a little bit this week, and I think as we kind of talked about forgiveness and just thought about this particular topic in anticipation, but also just in conversations about our real lives, just like yours, this is kind of like love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you level of gospel transformation. Like, it's one thing, we all agree, hey, we should be nice to each other, we should be kind, but you'd seldom see bumper stickers that say something along the lines of, forgive those who have wronged you. Right? Like, that's a bumper sticker that is probably it's not quite being produced. And it's probably not being produced in mass because it takes something outside of us to be incoming. Okay, don't worry. Okay, sorry about a little PTSD there. I'm okay. I'm back. So in this, we want to talk a little bit about forgiveness, about a little bit what it is and what it looks like and how we kind of walk it out in community with one another. Embracing the fact that the debt is real and has to be absorbed, has to be paid, has to be assumed by somebody in order to extend forgiveness to them. Tim Keller wrote his final book was the book Forgive. Wondered about that quite a bit, actually. But his final book was Forgive. He is one of the people that I've read a huge percentage of everything that he has read, at least in book form. He's been a massive influence in my life. And he gives an extended definition of forgiveness that helps us embrace the multi-layered. So I included it at length. It's a long paragraph, okay? I'm sorry. But I wanted us to kind of feel the fact that, wow, there is a lot here, because that's going to include a lot of us, because forgiveness can be very layered in texture. Here we go. He's got 4 things. It's a long paragraph, okay? A definition of forgiveness. He's got 4. I'm going to read it through. You can follow along. To forgive, then, is first to name the trespass truthfully, speak truth to one another, right, as wrong and punishable rather than merely excusing it, okay? Second, it is to identify with the perpetrator as a fellow sinner rather than thinking how different from you he or she is, just as God in Christ has forgiven you. It is to will their good. Third, it is to release the wrongdoer from liability by absorbing the debt oneself rather than seeking revenge and paying them back. And then finally, it is to aim for reconciliation rather than breaking off the relationship forever. Let's just leave that up there for a second. Can you hear like that? That's a multi-leveled, each one of those things can get, at least gives me pause. I've been over that paragraph and some of the stuff in the back end of the book more times than I can count in the last year and a half, okay? To forgive, name the trespass as wrong and punishable rather than merely excusing it. You got to name it. It's real. It's a debt. It's substantial. It is whatever it is, rather than being simply dismissing it, rather than brushing it aside, rather than saying it doesn't matter. I mean, right? We have so many different kinds of phrases for this. Instead of saying, no, it was a debt. The foundation of your house is full of termites, and we didn't budget for this, and we need an infusion of cash, or we can't do your room over here. It's real, okay? Like that you have to live there. Like that's substantive. Some of you, it's kind of like you think sometimes that when people are asking you to forgive, they're asking you to dismiss something that was profoundly wrong. No. That's not real forgiveness, okay? So we embrace that. Second, okay, we identify with the perpetrator. Okay, this can be so challenging, right? We identify with the perpetrator as a fellow sinner rather than thinking how different from you he or she is, okay? In other words, it's like, well, there's so many different variations of that. But to be able to say, because I've been forgiven, I can forgive. Because I've been forgiven, I can forgive. That I need Jesus, and you need Jesus, and so I can forgive you because Jesus has forgiven me. It's to level the playing field, to not to do the one up, one down, to not say, now I have superiority over you, or I am better. I'm amazed at how often this can rear its ugly head in me as I'm thinking about someone else or whatever, and I'm on the wrong side and I have to pay their debt. And it's like, okay, yeah, I'm not. Like, I'm with this. I was almost getting teary-eyed thinking as we were singing Worthy this morning at the fact that there are people that let me just put it this way. We don't see eye to eye on some things that are pretty substantial. And one day, because of what Jesus has done, it will evaporate and we will be in his presence together. That somehow the forgiveness will so overwhelm that we will be right because of what it is that he has done. And that is true because I stand in need of forgiveness just as much as he or she does. There's a third aspect here. Release the wrongdoer from liability by absorbing the debt oneself rather than seeking revenge and paying them back. Absorb the debt. Foundation is full of termite damage, right? Somehow we need an infusion of cash or not this room. but the debt has to be paid. And we think, really, Lord? Yeah. Where does the capacity for that come from? Because we've been forgiven. Because Jesus has infused us with the capacity to do. Remember, this is like love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you kind of stuff, right? This is not bumper sticker stuff. This is like, wow, but this is game-changing, world-changing stuff, right? Fourth, aim for reconciliation rather than breaking off the relationship, if that's at all possible. If you're like me, you are looking at some things and you're wondering, how is that even possible? Our friend Donna Jones has written a book called, what is it, Debbie? I'm sorry, Healthy Conflict, Peaceful Life. Thank you, I brought it with me. And she writes this, just as kind of an addendum, and then I'm going to welcome the worship team up and we're going to walk through this together. Since forgiveness is not giving our offender a free pass to hurt us again, the choice to forgive shouldn't be equated with the choice to trust or be reconciled. Forgiveness takes one person, but trust and reconciliation take two. Forgiveness is given. Trust is earned. Forgiveness can be immediate. Trust takes time. Forgiveness keeps no record of wrongs. Reconciliation requires ownership and repentance. Layered. Okay? But as we come and we talk about relationships in the context of community, let me pull back and say two things that we've talked about already before. The first one is, because of what Jesus has done, forgiven people can forgive people. Because of what he's done, forgiven people can forgive people. That we can follow in his footsteps in this dimension. And then secondly, that our words and our actions, by God's grace as his image bearers, have the power to build up and to bless. So as we collect and before we sing back to the Lord, I just want to invite you into just one thing here. And that is to receive Jesus' forgiveness. And then if there is anybody in your community and life who is in your debt, to begin the journey of extending that forgiveness and paying down their debt. Let's pray together and let's sing back to the Lord. And so, Father, we come and we bow before you as people who've been forgiven. Jesus, we were in your debt, a debt that we hopelessly could not pay. And you, as the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, did not say that you need a cash infusion, Osborne, or that we can't do this, but you overwhelmed my need and our need. You crushed it forever. And so as those people, Father, we want to come and we want to ask you for the grace and the power and the words and the wisdom to follow in your footsteps. Because forgiven people by your grace forgive people. Would you make that true in our marriages, true in our families, true in our community, true in our Seacoast church? And would you take that and would you change the world little bit by little bit through us as forgiven people who forgive people? It's in your